The late afternoon sun bled across the horizon in a fiery haze, casting long, jagged shadows over the dusty streets of Dry Creek, a frontier town clinging to life at the edge of Apache territory. Horse hooves echoed against the wooden boardwalks, the occasional clang of a blacksmith's hammer ringing through the air, mingling with the scent of smoke from cooking fires. It was a town built on survival, where strangers were greeted with suspicion and friendship was a rare, fragile commodity. Into this rough-and-tumble world stepped Navajo, a young woman with dark eyes that carried a quiet sorrow and a determination that radiated even from beneath the folds of her shawl. Navajo had journeyed from miles away, leaving behind a past that threatened to crush her spirit. She had been raised among settlers, yet her father's untimely death and a violent dispute with a land baron had forced her to flee. Her destination was uncertain, guided only by the hope of finding work and a place to belong. Dry Creek seemed small and unremarkable, but to her, it offered the promise of anonymity and safety. A fresh start where no one would know the mistakes or fears she carried in her heart. Dakota, an Apache man of the mountains and deserts beyond Dry Creek, observed the town from the outskirts. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet, commanding presence of someone who had survived hardships the townfolk could scarcely imagine. His dark hair fell loosely over shoulders that had known the strain of years spent hunting, tracking, and protecting his people. Dakota had ventured into town to negotiate peace with settlers encroaching on Apache land, a delicate mission fraught with tension. Many in Dry Creek viewed him with wariness, a shadow of fear and prejudice clouding their perception of the noble man before them. Their first encounter was almost accidental. Navajo, unaware of the brewing tension between settlers and Apache scouts, wandered too close to the edge of the trading post. A commotion arose, a pair of young, rowdy cowboys jeering and attempting to provoke the Apache presence. Dakota, calm yet alert, stepped forward, and in a flash, had diffused the situation with a quiet authority that made even the ringleaders pause. Navajo watched, captivated not just by his skill but by the silent dignity that seemed to radiate from him. She had never met anyone like Dakota, someone whose strength was tempered with an almost spiritual calm, whose eyes seemed to see beyond the surface of the world. She felt a pull, an inexplicable connection to a man she barely knew. It was fleeting, a spark, yet it left her heart racing in a way she could not understand. When their eyes met across the dusty street, the town seemed to fade into obscurity. Dakota's gaze lingered, assessing but never judging, and Navajo felt both exposed and safe in the same heartbeat. There was a silent conversation between them, a recognition of kindred souls bound by unspoken understanding. But in Dry Creek, such moments were fragile, easily broken by suspicion or circumstance. Dakota approached her later, under the pretense of ensuring she was unharmed by the earlier commotion. His voice was low, steady, carrying an authority that invited trust. "Are you safe?" he asked, his accent tinged with the cadence of the land he loved. Navajo nodded, though her heart fluttered with nerves. "I am." "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. In that brief exchange, a seed of trust was planted, one that would grow through shared glances, brief conversations, and acts of quiet protection. Over the next few days, their paths crossed more frequently. Dakota would appear when trouble threatened her, thwarting an overzealous storekeeper who tried to cheat her, guiding her away from the dangerous outskirts at night. Each intervention deepened the silent bond forming between them. Navajo began to recognize the subtle grace in Dakota's movements, the precision with which he navigated the rugged landscape, the care with which he treated others, whether Apache, settler, or animal alike. Yet, the world around them was not forgiving. Whispers followed Dakota wherever he went, and wary glances were cast toward Navajo for her association with him. Prejudice and fear simmered under the surface of Dry Creek's seemingly simple life. It became clear to both that any relationship they might dare to imagine would face not only their own fears but the judgments of a world unready to accept them. Despite this, moments of quiet intimacy grew between them. One evening, they shared a ride along a ridge overlooking the sprawling plains. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. They spoke little, but the silence spoke volumes. Dakota taught her to track the movement of animals, to read the signs of nature, and in return, Navajo shared tales of her travels and dreams. finding in Dakota a listener who absorbed every word with attention and respect. Romance in the frontier was not born of fleeting passion, but of shared survival and mutual respect. Each day, each small act of protection, each glance and unspoken word drew them closer. Dakota admired her courage, her ability to face hardship without losing her gentleness. Navajo admired his strength, his patience, and the quiet kindness that seemed almost otherworldly in a land so harsh and unforgiving. Yet even as their bond grew, the shadow of doubt loomed. Could a settler woman and an Apache man truly find happiness together in a world steeped in prejudice? Could love endure when survival itself was a daily battle? The tension between desire and practicality, heart and duty, began to shape the contours of their fledgling relationship, foreshadowing the trials that would soon test the limits of their devotion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Dry Creek in a twilight glow, they parted ways that evening with the unspoken understanding that their connection was rare and precious. A spark had ignited, fragile yet undeniable, a bond that would demand courage, resilience, and unwavering faith. In the untamed land of the American frontier, where danger lurked and hope was hard-won, two souls had found each other, a beginning of a love story that promised to defy distance, prejudice, and fear. The wind had shifted, carrying a hint of winter across the frontier town of Dry Creek. The sun hung low, casting a golden haze over the wooden boardwalks and the rough-hewn storefronts. Navajo walked quickly, her boots kicking up dust as she made her way to the small inn where she had been staying. Her heart pounded not from exertion, but from the storm of emotions swirling within her. Days had passed since her first meeting with Dakota, the Apache man who had stirred something in her that she had long thought dormant. His presence lingered in her mind like a persistent ember. Every glance he had given, every subtle act of kindness, every quiet moment spent together had left its mark, and yet fear gnawed at her resolve. Fear of the world, fear of the town's judgment, and fear of what it meant to allow herself to care for someone so different from her own people. Navajo had tried to push her feelings aside, convincing herself that this fleeting connection was a distraction, a dangerous indulgence. But the more she tried to deny it, the more her heart rebelled. She had lived through hardships that had taught her survival depended on caution, not on the indulgence of emotions. And yet here she was, torn between the desire to stay and the instinct to flee. The catalyst came that evening in the form of an unexpected threat. A traveling gang of bandits had passed through the town, leaving a trail of destruction and fear. They were known for their cruelty, preying on the vulnerable and the unsuspecting. Navajo had been warned to stay indoors to avoid the streets, but her duties at the inn had kept her exposed. It was in that moment, standing at the doorway of the inn, that she saw Dakota appear as if from the wind itself. His figure was a silhouette against the fading light, steady and commanding. He had come to warn her to offer protection, and in doing so, reminded her of the bond they had formed. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she felt a pang of sorrow. She knew that despite the connection between them, the world would not be kind to their union. Dry Creek was unforgiving, and the frontier was harsher still. To stay would mean courting danger not just for herself but for him as well. With a trembling voice, she whispered the words that had been forming in her heart, words she hoped would protect them both. "You will forget me." The statement was not a lie. It was a shield. She turned away, forcing herself to walk briskly down the dusty street, leaving Dakota behind. Her chest ached, her mind a battlefield of longing and fear. She tried to imagine a life without him, to erase the memory of his gaze, his quiet strength, and the way he had made her feel seen in a world that often ignored her. But Dakota, standing under the twilight sky, felt the sting of her words like a physical blow. He could see the tears she fought to hide, could hear the tremor in her voice. Yet he understood her intent. She was not rejecting him out of indifference, but out of fear of a world that would never accept them. And in that moment, his resolve hardened. He spoke softly, a vow carried on the wind. "I will find you, no matter the distance." It was not a threat, nor a plea. It was a promise. A promise that transcended prejudice, geography, and circumstance. Dakota turned his gaze toward the horizon, imagining the paths he would have to traverse, the dangers he would face, and the relentless pursuit that awaited him. His heart burned with a determination as fierce as the sun setting behind the mountains. Navajo's journey away from Dry Creek was fraught with uncertainty. She moved from town to town, always a step ahead of herself, never daring to linger. Each mile she traveled was a mixture of relief and heartache. Relief that she was free from the immediate dangers of prejudice and banditry, and heartache for the loss of Dakota's presence. At night, under the vast expanse of stars, she would think of him, of his quiet smile, his unwavering courage, and the way his eyes seemed to see her soul. She told herself repeatedly that he would forget, that he would move on, but the lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. Meanwhile, Dakota's journey of pursuit had already begun in his mind, even if not yet in action. He would have to navigate miles of unforgiving terrain, from rocky ridges to dense forests, rivers swollen from spring rains to desolate plains. Yet the thought of Navajo sustained him. Every step he imagined taking, every obstacle he envisioned overcoming, was measured against the promise he had whispered into the wind. Love, he realized, was not merely a fleeting emotion. It was a force that demanded courage, sacrifice, and unyielding commitment. The separation was as much a test of character as it was of fate. Navajo's courage was revealed in her attempts to build a new life, while carrying the weight of longing and loss. Dakota's bravery shone through in his unwavering commitment to find her, despite the vast distances and dangers that lay between them. Each faced challenges that were not only physical but emotional, testing the limits of their resilience and the depth of their hearts. In the solitude of her travels, Navajo came to understand the true nature of her feelings. What she had feared as fleeting affection was, in truth, a profound connection, one that could not be extinguished by distance or fear. Her whispered words, meant to protect them both, had not severed the bond. They had only delayed its inevitable expression. She realized that love, like the frontier itself, required bravery, the courage to face danger, the courage to trust, and the courage to hope against all odds. As the days turned to weeks, the story of their separation began to mirror the timeless tales of the Wild West, stories of longing, pursuit, and the unyielding human spirit. Dakota's vow became a guiding light, a beacon that would eventually bridge the miles between them. And for Navajo, the memory of his gaze, his strength, and his promise lingered like a quiet song, reminding her that no matter how far she traveled, some connections could never be erased. The whispered goodbye set the stage for a journey that would transcend miles and hardships, a journey that would test the limits of love and perseverance. In the heart of the untamed frontier where danger and desire intertwined, two souls had pledged themselves to each other, even in absence. And though separated by distance and circumstance, the promise remained. They would find one another no matter what the land, the world, or fate might throw in their path. Dakota rode through the twilight, the fading sun casting a burnished glow across the sprawling plains. The wind tugged at his hair and the folds of his cloak as he guided his horse along the uneven trail, leaving behind the familiar edges of Dry Creek and venturing into the unknown. Each mile he traversed was a testament to his determination, a promise he had made whispered into the air and etched into his heart. I will find you. No matter the distance, the frontier was a land of extremes. Rolling plains gave way to jagged cliffs, rivers swelled unpredictably from the spring rains, and forests stretched like endless mazes of shadow and danger. Yet Dakota moved with a grace born of years spent navigating the wilds. He read the tracks of animals as easily as he read the subtle signs of human presence, the disturbed earth, the broken twigs, the faint smoke rising in the distance. Every mark on the land was a clue, every sound a possible threat, and every star in the night sky a guide for his relentless pursuit. His journey was not without peril. Bandits roamed the plains, opportunistic and cruel, seeking travelers to rob or terrorize. Once, while fording a river swollen with runoff from the mountains, he narrowly avoided being swept away by the current, gripping the horse's mane with calloused hands and relying on his knowledge of the land to find solid footing. Another night, as he slept under the wide sky, he awoke to the distant sound of a coyote pack. While the creatures were no real threat, the reminder of the wilderness's harshness weighed on him. Yet with each challenge his resolve only strengthened. For every mile conquered, every danger survived. He carried the image of Navajo in his mind, the curve of her shoulders, the depth of her eyes, the quiet courage that had drawn him to her from the very beginning. Dakota's journey was also a journey through memory. He recalled the brief encounters with Navajo, The way she had smiled nervously when they first met, the way her hands had trembled ever so slightly when she had spoken, the quiet determination that shone through her gentle demeanor. Each recollection fueled his perseverance. He imagined her riding alongside him, facing the dangers together, and though they were apart, the vision sustained him. But the journey was not only physical, it was also a test of character. Along the way, Dakota encountered travelers in need, a mother and her child stranded in the wilderness, a settler with a broken wagon wheel, a lost traveler searching for a distant homestead. Each encounter allowed him to demonstrate the nobility of his spirit. Though his primary goal was to find Navajo, he could not ignore the suffering of others. His actions revealed not only strength but compassion, a moral compass that guided him as steadfastly as the North Star. The land itself seemed to test him. Harsh winds tore across the plains. Rain turned the trails to mud, and the sun scorched him during the day, leaving his skin rough and tanned from exposure. Yet each obstacle reminded him that love, like survival in the frontier, required endurance. He slept little, ate sparingly, and trusted in his instincts to guide him. And always the thought of Navajo pushed him onward. Meanwhile, unknown to Dakota, Navajo's own journey mirrored his in many ways. She traveled from town to town, seeking work, safety, and anonymity. Yet she could not escape the shadow of her feelings for him. At night, she traced the outline of his face in her mind, recalling the brief moments they had shared, wondering if he had truly forgotten her, or if his vow of pursuit remained alive across the miles. Her heart ached with longing, but she also drew strength from the thought of his determination. Dakota faced not only natural obstacles but human ones as well. Settlements along the way were wary of his presence. Some townsfolk viewed an Apache man with suspicion, assuming threats where none existed. On several occasions, he had to carefully navigate tense confrontations, relying on diplomacy and patience rather than brute force. Each encounter reminded him that the world was not always fair, but that love demanded resilience in the face of injustice. The journey also tested Dakota's patience. Days and nights blended into one another, each marked by the rhythm of horse hooves, the crackle of campfires, and the endless horizon. He would often pause to gaze at the stars, imagining Navajo beneath the same sky, separated by miles yet bound by a shared constancy. It was in these quiet moments that he reflected on the nature of love, how it was not merely a fleeting feeling but a force that demanded courage, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. During a stormy night, Dakota found shelter in a small cave on the side of a cliff. Rain lashed against the rock and thunder rolled across the mountains like a distant drum. He huddled close to the fire he had built, listening to the roar of the storm, and allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. He admitted to himself, if only in thought, that he feared losing her, not to another person but to the vast, indifferent wilderness, to the capricious nature of fate. Yet he also knew that to waver now would be to betray the promise he had made. As he continued his journey, signs of civilization appeared, settlements, trading posts, and trails used by settlers and native tribes alike. Each new town brought the possibility of news, a hint of her presence, and renewed hope. He questioned locals subtly, observing, listening, and reading between words to gather clues. Each fragment of information, no matter how small, propelled him forward. Despite the solitude, Dakota never felt truly alone. The memory of Navajo, the promise he had made, and the moral imperative of his quest became companions as steadfast as any human presence. The land, with all its dangers and beauty, became a backdrop to a story of love and devotion that transcended ordinary experience. The journey across the frontier was more than a pursuit. It was a crucible that forged Dakota's character and tested the limits of his endurance. Every challenge faced, every mile crossed, every decision made with care and courage brought him closer to the woman who had captured his heart. It was a story of determination against impossible odds, of love that refused to be confined by distance, and of the human spirit's capacity to endure in the harshest of landscapes. By the time Dakota reached the outskirts of a distant town, he was battered, exhausted, and weathered. Yet his resolve had not diminished. He knew that Navajo was near, somewhere within the web of trails and towns that made up the frontier. And though the journey had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, it had also strengthened him, preparing him for the trials that would soon come. For Dakota, the frontier was no longer just land. It was a testament to the power of a vow. Love had transformed every hardship into purpose, every obstacle into motivation. He rode into the next town with renewed determination, ready to continue the pursuit that had become the defining journey of his life. Somewhere out there, Navajo waited, unaware of how close he might be, and when they met again, the reunion promised to be as fierce, passionate, and enduring as the landscape they had both traversed. The town of Silver Creek was small, nestled between jagged hills and the dense brush of the frontier. Dust swirled in the streets as the sun burned low on the horizon, and the air carried the scent of smoke, pine, and dry earth. Dakota had arrived at the town's edge, weary from his long journey but undeterred. Every mile traveled, every challenge faced across the untamed frontier had led him here. The promise he had whispered under the twilight sky, "I will find you no matter the distance," was now within reach. Navajo, unaware of how close he was, had arrived in Silver Creek just days earlier. She had taken work at a small general store, hoping to remain unnoticed, blending into the town's sparse population. Though she sought safety and solitude, the memory of Dakota haunted her every waking thought. Each night she lay beneath the wide, star-filled sky, imagining him crossing deserts and rivers, mountains and plains, chasing a promise that mirrored her own longing. Fate, as it often does, orchestrated their reunion in the midst of danger. That morning, a gang of ruthless outlaws had descended upon Silver Creek. Their leader, a man known for his cruelty, demanded protection money from the townsfolk, threatening violence if refused. The town, caught off guard and unprepared, trembled under the weight of impending doom. Navajo, carrying supplies outside the store, froze as the gang rode through, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. Her heart leapt, not from fear, though fear was certainly present, but from a deep, unrelenting hope. Dakota had to be near. He had to come. And then she saw him, emerging from the hills like a shadow made flesh, his horse galloping steadily, eyes fixed on the approaching threat. The sight of him sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins, a mixture of relief, admiration, and longing. The confrontation was immediate. The outlaws, seeing Dakota, laughed cruelly, underestimating the quiet strength of a man whose presence radiated authority and danger in equal measure. They demanded he leave or face them, but Dakota, unflinching, dismounted, hands steady on the reins of his horse. His gaze fell upon Navajo, and she felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of fear and the ache of having waited so long for this moment. Dakota moved with fluid precision, a combination of training, instinct, and raw courage. He disarmed one outlaw with a swift strike, using his surroundings to his advantage while deflecting attacks from another. The townsfolk watched in awe as the Apache man, unafraid and unrelenting, faced the threat with the strength of a storm. Every movement was calculated, yet infused with the silent power of a man driven by love as much as necessity. Amid the chaos, Navajo's fear gave way to determination. She realized she could not simply hide. She had to act, to contribute to their shared survival. Fetching a barrel for cover, she called out to the townsfolk, coordinating a defense of sorts, her voice steady despite the terror. Dakota, even in the heat of battle, acknowledged her presence with a fleeting glance. A connection, a reassurance that they were united despite the danger surrounding them. The showdown reached its climax as the gang leader, larger and more menacing than the rest, advanced toward Navajo. Dakota intercepted him, every muscle taut, every sense heightened. The fight was swift and brutal, a test of skill, courage, and sheer will. Dakota's resolve never wavered, and finally the outlaw fell, defeated, leaving the rest of the gang disoriented and terrified. Dakota's presence alone was enough to disperse them. The remaining outlaws fled, leaving Silver Creek trembling but safe. When the dust settled, Dakota turned to Navajo. The sight of her unharmed, standing tall despite fear, brought a rare smile to his face. He approached slowly, aware of the tension still lingering between them, yet certain of his purpose. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice low and steady, carrying the weight of concern and relief. Navajo's lips trembled, and tears threatened to spill. I'm fine," she whispered, though the truth was more complex. Her heart raced with relief, with the exhilaration of danger survived, and with the overwhelming presence of the man she had been waiting for, the man who had promised to find her. In that moment, the emotional barriers of fear and distance dissolved. Dakota extended a hand, and she took it without hesitation. The touch was electric, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured to arrive at this point. Words seemed insufficient, unnecessary even, for the bond between them spoke louder than language. Their eyes met, holding a conversation that was intimate, urgent, and eternal in its intensity. Dakota's hand brushed a strand of hair from her face, his gaze softening with a tenderness that contrasted with the ferocity he had displayed moments earlier. "I told you I would find you," he said, almost a whisper, almost a vow. Navajo nodded, tears now streaming freely. "I never doubted it. I never wanted you to forget me." The emotional reunion was heightened by the shared experience of danger. They had been tested not only by distance but by circumstance. The threat of the outlaws, the unpredictability of the frontier, and the societal tensions that surrounded them had forged a connection that was unbreakable. The relief and joy of survival merged with the depth of love and desire, creating a moment that was both exhilarating and profound. Dakota and Navajo spoke then, words flowing freely, yet every phrase laden with meaning. She recounted her travels, the towns she had passed through, the moments she had longed for him. He shared the trials he had faced, the obstacles overcome, and the constant presence of her memory guiding him. Each story, each recollection strengthened their bond, intertwining their lives in ways that transcended geography and hardship. By the time night fell over Silver Creek, they were no longer merely individuals who had found each other. They were a united force, a pair whose love had been tested and proven resilient. The frontier, with all its danger, unpredictability, and harshness, had served not to separate them but to reveal the depth of their devotion. As they stood together under the star-studded sky, the wind carrying the scent of pine and earth, the town below seemed insignificant compared to the vast landscape around them. They embraced a long, silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured and everything yet to come. The promise of love had been fulfilled in its most primal, elemental form, through struggle, through courage, and through unwavering faith in one another. And as the night deepened, Dakota and Navajo looked toward the horizon, knowing that while the frontier still held dangers, they would face them together. Their hearts, bound by trials and triumphs, were now inseparable, ready to embark on the final chapter of their journey, a new life together, where love would guide them as much as courage, and hope would illuminate every step forward. The sun rose over the horizon in a soft blaze of gold and crimson, illuminating the rugged landscape that had been both a trial and a witness to Dakota and Navajo's love. The frontier, once a place of uncertainty and danger, now stretched before them as a canvas for a new beginning. Their journey had been long, filled with peril and separation, but each step, each obstacle, had only strengthened the bond between them. Now, after months of pursuit, challenge, and unwavering commitment, they were finally free to shape a life together. Dakota had brought Navajo to a sheltered valley, nestled between rolling hills and shaded by towering pines. The area was secluded enough to offer safety and peace, yet fertile and welcoming for the life they wished to build. The land carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth, a stark contrast to the dust and peril of Dry Creek. Here, the weight of past fears seemed to dissolve, leaving only the quiet anticipation of a shared future. Their first days together were filled with work, laughter, and discovery. Dakota showed Navajo how to fish in the nearby river, teaching her the subtle art of reading the water and the behavior of the trout beneath its surface. He demonstrated how to track animals, gather firewood efficiently, and prepare meals over an open flame. Each lesson delivered with patience and the unspoken care that had always marked his interactions with her. Navajo in turn shared her knowledge of sewing, cooking, and reading, teaching Dakota the small skills that made daily life smoother and brighter. Their partnership was a dance of mutual respect and affection, where every task was imbued with laughter, teasing, and tender glances. Though the land was generous, the frontier was never without challenges. Harsh weather, unpredictable wildlife, and occasional encounters with travelers reminded them of the dangers that had always surrounded them. Yet these challenges no longer frightened them in the same way. Together they faced every storm and every difficulty with the confidence born of trust. Dakota's strength and skill, combined with Navajo's resilience and ingenuity, created a life where fear was tempered by love, and solitude was replaced by companionship. The couple also worked to integrate their lives with those of nearby settlers and Apache families. Dakota's presence, once a source of tension in towns like Dry Creek, was now seen as a bridge between cultures. Navajo's warmth and determination softened the hearts of those around her, creating bonds of friendship and mutual respect. They became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that love could transcend long-held prejudices and unite even the most unlikely of hearts. Evenings were the most cherished times. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Dakota and Navajo would sit by the fire, the warmth of the flames reflecting in their eyes. They shared stories of the past, their experiences during separation, and dreams for the future. Often their conversation would fall silent, and in that quiet the depth of their connection spoke louder than words ever could. The gentle clasp of hands, the soft brush of fingers, the intimate glances, they were moments that solidified the love that had survived distance, danger, and doubt. Their life together was not only built on survival but on creating beauty and comfort in the harshness of the frontier. Navajo planted a small garden, teaching Dakota which herbs could heal minor injuries and which vegetables would flourish in the valley's soil. Dakota built a sturdy cabin with his own hands, a symbol of permanence and security, where each log and nail carried the intention of sheltering their love. The cabin became a haven, filled with warmth, laughter, and the promise of a shared future that was finally within reach. Despite the isolation, they occasionally traveled to nearby towns to trade goods or visit other Apache families. Each trip reminded them of the journey they had taken, the miles traveled, the dangers faced, and the relentless hope that had driven them. Their presence in these towns was met with curiosity and increasingly respect. They had not only survived the challenges of the frontier but had flourished, demonstrating that love, courage, and integrity could transform even the harshest of environments. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. Spring brought a flush of new growth to the valley, mirroring the growth of their love. Summer filled the air with the hum of insects and the scent of wildflowers, perfect for long walks and quiet moments together. Autumn painted the hills in shades of gold and amber, and winter, while harsh, offered a time for closeness, sitting by the fire and recounting the adventures of the year. Each season became a chapter in their shared story, a testament to the endurance and resilience of their love. Their relationship deepened in ways that went beyond the physical or the practical. Dakota's quiet strength offered Navajo a sense of security she had never known, while her compassion and intelligence provided him with comfort and joy. Together they discovered the profound satisfaction of partnership, not the fleeting excitement of romance, but the enduring fulfillment of a life shared fully and unreservedly. Their love was a living, breathing force, one that grew stronger with every shared hardship, every triumph, and every quiet moment of understanding. Eventually, they began to imagine a family, a continuation of their legacy and a testament to the life they had built together. The thought of children, of raising a new generation in a world that they had worked so hard to navigate and protect, filled them with hope and purpose. They spoke often of teaching their children the skills of survival, the wisdom of kindness, and the importance of courage and loyalty. Their dreams were rooted not in fantasy but in the tangible, rugged reality of the land they called home, a land that had tested them and now welcomed them as partners. In the evenings, they would sit outside their cabin, gazing at the stars that had once guided Dakota across the wilderness. Now those same stars seemed to shine brighter, reflected in the peace and contentment of a life shared. Dakota would often take Navajo's hand in his, a silent reaffirmation of the promise he had made months earlier. "I found you," he would whisper, and she would smile, her eyes shining with a mixture of love, gratitude, and the knowledge that their journey had only just begun. Their story, once defined by separation and danger, was now defined by hope, partnership, and enduring love. The frontier which had tested their limits had become the backdrop for a life that neither had dared to imagine when they first met. Together they had transformed adversity into opportunity, fear into courage, and longing into a bond that could withstand time, distance, and the harsh realities of the untamed West. And so, as the sun set over their valley, casting long, warm shadows over the cabin and garden, Dakota and Navajo embraced, knowing that their love had survived every trial. The frontier was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to the power of devotion. They had faced the wilderness together, conquered the dangers of the world, and emerged not only unbroken but stronger, their hearts intertwined in a love that would endure forever. In the end, their new life together was more than survival. It was a celebration of love's triumph over distance, danger, and doubt. It was a life built on courage, trust, and mutual respect, and as the stars emerged one by one in the vast night sky, Dakota and Navajo knew without question that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, their hearts forever bound by the journey that had brought them home.